justice, and I'm hoping that the High Court shall actually get through with us on the date, on the 5th of October, and immediately be clear as to where it is going.
The majority of South Africans say they are unlikely to get the COVID-19 jab. Nearly half of those surveyed believe that prayer is more effective than vaccination in preventing COVID-19. Now, this is according to a new Afrobarometer survey, and the survey shows most people have little to no faith in government's ability to ensure the safety of COVID-19 vaccines. So let's unpack this with South African Reconciliation Barometer project leader Mikhail Moosa. Thank you for your time, Mikhail, and good morning to you. We'll get into the stats in just a moment, the data and what South Africans are saying, but what's the importance of, this survey? What exactly is it meant to tell us?
Thanks very much for having me. Yes, the importance of this data, I think, is the fact that this is one of the first face-to-face nationwide nationally representative surveys, public opinion surveys that have been carried out since the start of the pandemic. So if you look at a lot of the other surveys that have come out over the last year or 18 months, a lot of these have either been telephonic surveys or online surveys, which have their limitations in terms of the methodology and accuracy. So you're unable to call people in different languages or get a nationally representative sample. But the Afrobarometer sample is based off face-to-face interviews in all 9 provinces in multiple languages, allowing respondents to have a voice, to have an opinion on the COVID-19 vaccine, on COVID-19 more generally, and their government's performance. So I think the value in this survey is really to ask people, what are they thinking about the government's performance?
Right.
How were they affected by the lockdown? And what are their views on the vaccine as well?
And what does the survey tell us, just in terms of, the results that you've received? I mean, if I can just peek alone on the information here, 7 out of 10, saying that they're not so sure that they have confidence in government's ability to provide safe vaccines.
Yes, so that's one of the more damning findings that we have in the survey. I think it's also important to keep in mind that the field work for this was conducted in May and June of this year. So still very early on in the phase 2 of the vaccination process. So hopefully attitudes towards vaccination would have improved by then. But certainly from the data that we have, we see that a lot of people sort of tie their trust in the vaccine to their trust in the government. A lot of people said that social relief funds were either lost to corruption or distributed unfairly, and that has also impacted their belief in the government to ensure the safety of the vaccine. But we can only hope that since then, with hundreds of thousands of people being vaccinated each day, and that people sharing the safety and news of the vaccination with their peers, that people's attitudes would have changed by then. But certainly, I think what the survey reveals is that vaccine hesitancy, at least, or certain distrust of the vaccine is still very much present in South Africa, particularly amongst young people.
Well, we've also seen, obviously, how government was rolling out the vaccines, starting with the elderly, those with comorbidities, our frontline healthcare workers, etc., then coming now to the 18 and 34-year-olds expected now to receive their jab. What is almost the sense, the opinions from the 2 different age groups, the elderly as well as the young? Are we seeing different views in terms of the vaccine?
Yeah, we see quite significant differences between older and younger respondents to whether they would be likely to get the vaccine. So back in May and June, when the Afrobarometer survey was held, that was just the start of when people over the age of 60 were being able to register and receive their first doses. And what we find is that respondents over the age of 60 were much more likely to say that they would get vaccinated, much more likely to trust the safety of the vaccine. So I think this is also linked to the fact that that demographic is, of course, at most at risk of COVID-19 infection and the most negative consequences of it. So we see quite a big uptake from that older demographic, whereas younger people, perhaps less affected by COVID-19 in some ways, were much less likely to say that they would get vaccinated. But again, hopefully these attitudes would have changed over the last few months. And really what we need is more data to suggest which people are going to access the vaccine as well. And interestingly as well, we see that rural respondents living in rural areas, were more likely to say that they would get the vaccine than urban respondents as well.
Right. Interestingly, I'm also seeing, Mikhail, that around 47% of citizens and respondents believe that prayer would be much more effective, just in terms of curbing COVID-19 than vaccines. I suppose, with bearing that in mind, before I let you go, what sort of a challenge do you think this then poses to government, because they are still, busy with their mass vaccination drive?
Yeah, so I mean, that's quite a striking finding. I think it's also important to realize that prayer is something that people hold very dearly for various reasons as well. But I also think it speaks to the need for government and civil society more broadly to form a sort of broad coalition, talking to trade unions, talking to church leaders, talking to religious leaders of different faiths as well, to ensure that their congregations, that their audiences understand that the vaccine can provide something that prayer can't in a sort of physiological immunity to COVID-19. So I think what we really need is the buy-in of church leaders, religious leaders, and government as well, and the media, of course, to ensure that we understand what the vaccine can do for people and that it is necessary to take it in order to have any chance of overcoming the pandemic.
All right, Mikhail, a pleasure talking to you this morning. South African Reconciliation Barometer Project Leader Mikhail Moosa, thank you for your time.
Let's talk about the vaccine rollout for the moment. Experts still concerned about